The late afternoon sun, the colour of warm honey, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Crestwood Manor ballroom. It cast a golden glow on everything it touched. The towering floral arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus, the shimmering champagne flutes, the joyful faces of friends and family. My son, Mark, stood beside his new wife, Sarah, their profiles etched against the panoramic view of the rolling Virginia hills. His smile was the brightest thing in the room, a beacon of pure, unadulterated happiness that I hadn't seen since he was a boy opening his Maine Christmas present. I felt a familiar pang in my chest, a bittersweet cocktail of pride, love, and the melancholic awareness that a chapter of my life was closing as his was just beginning. Every detail of this day was a testament to love, but also, if I were being honest with myself, to my life's work. As a widow who had built a successful real estate business from the ground up after my husband Tom passed away, I had made sure Mark never wanted for anything. This wedding was no exception. The venue, the five-star catering, the nine-piece band currently playing a soft jazz melody. I had signed every check, approved every invoice. It was a gift, given freely and with a full heart. All I wanted was to see that smile on his face. Sarah looked breathtaking in a lace gown that seemed spun from moonlight. She was a sweet girl, an art history major with big dreams and a family, the Prestons, who came from what they delicately referred to as old money. The reality, which I'd pieced together from conversations and context, was that the old money had dwindled to little more than a prestigious surname and a collection of anecdotes about their ancestors. They maintained the airs of wealth, but lacked the substance. It was why, despite their initial subtle protests, they had graciously allowed me to fund the entire wedding. "We want the children to have the best start," Sarah's mother, Cynthia, had said, her voice smooth as silk, "and you are in such a fortunate position to provide that, Helen." I didn't mind, I truly didn't. Seeing Mark and Sarah together, their hands intertwined, made every penny feel insignificant. I moved through the reception, my heels sinking slightly into the plush Persian rug, my task to ensure everything ran smoothly. I adjusted a centerpiece here, shared a warm laugh with one of Mark's college friends there, and deflected the well-meaning but pitying glances from older relatives who still saw me as poor Helen, the woman who lost her husband too soon. They didn't see the steel beneath the surface, the long nights and relentless ambition that had allowed me to give my son the world. As I passed a marble column near the roaring fireplace, I saw a small cluster of Sarah's family. There was Cynthia, her posture ramrod straight in a stiff Chanel suit, her sister Brenda, whose eyes always held a glint of sharp assessment, and a few cousins. They were speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones, their champagne flutes held like tiny weapons. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, simply navigating my way toward the terrace for a breath of fresh air. But then, a snippet of their conversation snagged my attention, sharp and cold as a fishhook. It was Brenda's voice, a stage whisper that carried easily in a momentary lull in the music. "The ceremony was lovely, I suppose, a bit extravagant for my taste. But then, she's paying for it all, so she gets to call the shots." Cynthia gave a tight, almost imperceptible nod. "It's the least she could do. Mark is a wonderful boy, but he's marrying into the Preston family. There are standards." Then came the phrase that stopped my heart. It was a younger cousin, a girl named Tiffany, with a bored expression on her face. She gestured vaguely in my direction with her flute, not realizing how close I was. "Is she always this involved, or is she just the wallet?" A brittle, condescending laugh rippled through the group. "Darling," Brenda cooed, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness, "she's not just the wallet, she's the wallet, here to make sure the bills are paid," and then fade into the background. "That's her role." The words hit me with physical force. The wallet, not Helen, not Mark's mother, not a guest of honor, just an object, a function, a resource to be exploited and then dismissed. For a moment, the gilded ballroom seemed to tilt on its axis. The cheerful chatter of the guests became a dull roar in my ears. The golden sunlight felt harsh and interrogating. I froze behind the column, my hand clutching the cool, unyielding marble. Every sacrifice, every late night poring over contracts, every lonely holiday I'd worked so my son could have a debt-free start, it all coalesced into this one, brutal, dehumanizing label. They thought I was just a walking bank account, a means to an end, the silent benefactor for their daughter's fairy tale wedding, a fairy tale they couldn't afford themselves. My breath caught in my throat. The initial shock was a cold wave, but it was quickly followed by something else, something hot and unfamiliar. It was rage, pure and clean and sharp as a shard of glass. I had spent years being polite, accommodating, swallowing small slights for the sake of keeping the peace for Mark. Stall per Lebentwanebi. I had ignored the subtle condescension from the Prestons about my new money background. But this was different. This wasn't a slight. It was a definition. It was the box they had built for me, lined with my own money, and they expected me to climb inside and shut the lid. My whole life, I'd been a fighter. I fought to keep my business afloat after Tom died. I fought to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry. I fought to raise a good man on my own. And in that moment, I realized I had stopped fighting for myself in my own family. I had become so focused on providing that I had allowed them to forget I was a person. I took a slow, deliberate breath, the air feeling thick and heavy in my lungs. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the soft jazz. I could stay here, hidden behind the column. I could walk away, pretend I hadn't heard, and let the poison fester inside me. I could cry in the restroom, then reapply my makeup and my smile, and continue playing the part they had assigned me. That was the easy path. That was the path of the wallet. But the woman who had built an empire from scratch, the woman who had faced down bankers and builders and belligerent clients, was not going to hide. Not today. My spine straightened. The tremor in my hands ceased. I unclenched my jaw and let the cold fury settle into a calm, icy resolve. I pushed myself away from the marble column and took a single step into the light. Then another, and another. I walked slowly, deliberately, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor. The sound was unnervingly loud in the sudden silence of my mind. The small group of Prestons hadn't noticed me yet. They were still basking in the glow of their shared disdain. Brenda was just starting another sentence. The honeymoon in Bali is all her course. Sarah said. That's when I cleared my throat. It wasn't a loud sound, but it cut through their private bubble with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. 4 pairs of eyes snapped toward me. The smirks on their faces didn't so much fall as they froze, cracking like cheap porcelain. Tiffany's jaw went slack. Cynthia's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Brenda's eyes widened, just for a second, before a mask of haughty indifference slid into place. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. They were waiting for me to excuse myself, to ask if they needed another drink, to play the role, waiting for the wallet to perform its function. I held their gazes one by one, letting them see the storm brewing in my eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I'm sorry to interrupt, I began, my voice even and dangerously calm. I was just on my way to the terrace, and I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. It was illuminating. The air around the Preston clan grew thick with unspoken panic. Cynthia's face, a carefully constructed mask of aristocratic composure, began to show tiny cracks. Her hand fluttered nervously to the pearls at her throat. Brenda, ever the actress, tilted her head with feigned innocence. Helen, my dear, I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, I think you do, I replied, my voice remaining soft, which only seemed to amplify the tension. I took another step closer, entering their personal space, forcing them to look at me not as a distant figure, but as the woman standing right in front of them. You were discussing my role. I believe the term used was the wallet. Tiffany paled, looking like a frightened child who had just been caught drawing on the walls. She stammered, it wasn't. Please, I said, holding up a hand to stop her. Don't insult my intelligence on top of everything else. Let's not pretend I misheard. I let my eyes drift over their expensive, yet slightly dated attire, the jewelry that was probably inherited, the air of superiority they wore like a shield. You see, a wallet is an interesting thing. It's an object. It has no feelings, no opinions, no history. It just opens and closes on command. Is that really what you think of me? Cynthia finally found her voice, a strained, high-pitched version of its usual silken tones. Helen, this is hardly the time or place. We are at our children's wedding. You're making a scene. Am I? I asked, a genuine question. I glanced around. The band was still playing, people were still laughing and talking, oblivious. No one else seems to have noticed. Right now, this is just a private conversation between us. You see, you chose the time and place when you decided to have this little chat. I'm just choosing to respond. My gaze settled on Brenda, who was staring at me with pure, unadulterated loathing. You seem to believe my only contribution here is financial. It's a common mistake people like you make. You see the result, this beautiful room, the fine food, the open bar that I notice you're all enjoying immensely, and you assume it came from nowhere. You think money is just there. For people like me, at least. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Let me tell you what a wallet doesn't have. It doesn't have the memory of working 2 jobs while my late husband Tom was in night school. It doesn't remember the fear of using our entire savings to start a business after he died, leaving me with a 10-year-old son to raise alone. It doesn't have the scars on its hands from renovating the first few properties myself because I couldn't afford a contractor. Their faces were now a mixture of shock and horror. This was not in the script. The wallet was speaking. This extravagant party, I continued, gesturing to the ballroom, wasn't paid for by some magical, endlessly refilling purse. It was paid for by 17-hour workdays, by missed school plays and dinners eaten alone at my desk, by every single risk I took, and every sacrifice I made to build a life for my son, so he would never have to experience the kind of fear and uncertainty I did. I then turned my full attention to Cynthia. You said I'm in a fortunate position. Fortune had nothing to do with it. This is the result of grit, intelligence, and relentless hard work, things your family seems to hold in such disdain, preferring to cling to the ghost of a legacy your great-grandfather built. My voice dropped lower. A legacy, if I recall correctly from my due diligence, that has been so poorly managed it's now little more than a pile of debt and a few dusty heirlooms. Cynthia gasped, her face flushing a deep, mottled red. How dare you? How dare I? The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. I dare because you have been living in a fantasy, propped up by my reality. I dare because while you were teaching Sarah about standards, I was teaching my son about character. And I dare because you seem to have forgotten a crucial detail in this little arrangement. I saw a flicker of movement over Brenda's shoulder. It was Mark and Sarah, walking hand in hand towards us, their faces beaming. They hadn't heard anything yet. They were just coming to greet their family. My heart ached for my son. This was the last thing I wanted for his wedding day. But the die was cast. The Prestons had lit the fuse. Mark's smile faltered as he got closer, sensing the palpable tension. "Mom? Aunt Brenda? Cynthia? Is everything okay?" Brenda tried to recover, forcing a brittle smile. "Of course, Mark, darling. Your mother was just telling us a story about the old days." "Was she?" Mark looked at me, his brow furrowed with concern. He knew my calm voice. He knew it meant a storm had either just passed or was about to break. Sarah looked from her mother's furious face to my composed one. "What's going on?" I looked directly at Cynthia and Brenda, giving them one last chance to own their words. They remained silent, their jaws clamped shut in a pact of denial. "It's all right, Mark," I said, my voice softening as I spoke to my son. "Your new aunts-in-law and I were just clarifying my role in the family. There seems to have been some confusion. I then looked at Sarah, my expression one of regret, but not apology. Sarah, honey, I'm sorry this is happening now, but your mother and your aunt just shared some opinions with me that I felt needed to be addressed immediately. Sarah's eyes darted to her mother. Mom? What did you say? Cynthia bristled, drawing herself up. Helen is overreacting. It was a private comment completely misconstrued. Was it? I countered, my patience wearing thin. Was calling me the wallets a misinterpretation? Was saying my only purpose here was to pay for everything, and then fade into the background just a simple misunderstanding? Sarah's face went white. She looked at her mother, horrified. You said that? Mark took a step forward, his expression hardening. You said that about my mum? He asked, his voice low and disbelieving, directed at Cynthia and Brenda. Brenda, cornered and defiant, chose to double down. Oh, for heaven's sake, everyone is so sensitive. It was a joke. Can't anyone take a joke? Helen has been more than generous, and we are all very grateful. Gratitude and respect are two very different things, Brenda. I stated calmly. You can be grateful for a cash machine. You only respect a person. I turned back to my son and Sarah. I have never in my life asked for anything in return for what I've given my son. My love is unconditional, but my money is not. My resources, my support, my time, those things are deeply conditional. They are conditioned on respect, on decency, on being seen as a human being. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. This was the point of no return. When your father, Tom, passed away, he left me with very little money but a great deal of advice. He was a lawyer, a very meticulous one. He taught me to protect myself, to always have clauses and contingencies. It's a lesson I applied to my business, and as it turns out, to my life. I looked at Sarah, then at her dumbfounded family. I paid for this wedding. I paid the deposit on the beautiful house you and Mark are supposed to move into next month. I set up a trust fund to help you both start your lives, to pay for your graduate school, Sarah, and to help Mark launch his own business. I let that hang in the air. The expressions on the Prestons' faces were a sight to behold, a grotesque ballet of greed, panic, and dawning comprehension. You see, I continued, my voice as steady as a rock, you thought you were dealing with a simple wallet. But a wallet doesn't have a lawyer. I do. And on the advice of that lawyer, every single one of those significant financial gifts comes with a clause. It's a simple one, really. A morality clause of a sort. It stipulates that the gifts are contingent on the respectful and dignified treatment of me, the benefactor, by all immediate family members, including, of course, the in-laws. The silence that followed was absolute. The jazz music seemed to have faded into a distant memory. It was as if a soundproof wall had descended around our small group. Mark stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and, I thought, a glimmer of awe. Sarah looked as if she might faint. Cynthia finally whispered, her voice a dry rasp. You wouldn't I? I met her gaze, and for the first time I think she saw me. Not the dowdy, hard-working widow, not the new money pushover. She saw the woman who had clawed her way to the top and had learned to protect her territory. You assumed my generosity was a sign of weakness. You mistook kindness for foolishness. You decided to bite the hand that was feeding not just your daughter, but your entire family's charade of solvency. So, to answer your question, Cynthia, watch me. The wallet is now closed. Leaving the Prestons frozen in their tableau of horror, I turned to my son, Mark, Sarah. I love you both. This is your day. Please, try to enjoy the rest of it. We will talk later. My voice was gentle but firm. I gave Mark's arm a squeeze and offered Sarah a small, sad smile before turning and walking away, not looking back. I didn't go to the terrace. I walked straight through the ballroom, past the smiling, oblivious guests, my head held high. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes after a massive storm has passed, leaving a trail of destruction but also clean, fresh air. I found a small, unoccupied library off the main hall, the air smelling of old leather and lemon polish. I closed the heavy oak door behind me, and the muffled sounds of the reception faded away. For the first time all day, I let myself sink into a plush armchair. The adrenaline began to recede, and the full weight of what I had just done settled upon me. I had detonated a bomb in the middle of my son's wedding. A part of me screamed in regret. This was supposed to be his perfect day, a memory he would cherish forever. Instead, I had tainted it with family drama and financial threats. But another, stronger part of me felt a fierce, unapologetic pride. I had stood up for myself. I had demanded the respect I deserved. For years I had been Helen, the provider. Helen, the problem solver. Helen, the uncomplaining foundation upon which everyone else built their lives. I had forgotten to be just Helen, the woman who had her own feelings, her own limits, her own breaking points. The Prestons hadn't just insulted me, they had awakened a part of me I had long suppressed for the sake of peace. My mind drifted back to Tom. He had been the heart of our family, while I had been the strategist. He was the one who taught Mark how to throw a baseball. I was the one who taught him how to read a balance sheet. After Tom was gone, I had to be both. I remember him telling me, shortly before he passed, his voice weak but his eyes clear, "Helen, don't let them walk all over you. Your kindness is your greatest strength, but it's also your biggest vulnerability. Put up fences. Good fences make good neighbors, and they make good family too." I hadn't listened. I thought my generosity was a language everyone would understand. I thought pouring my resources into my family was the ultimate expression of love. But the Prestons had taught me a harsh lesson to some people. Generosity is just an open tab. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was Mark. I ignored it. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again. Finally I answered, my voice quiet. "Hello, Mark. Mom." What the hell was that? His voice was tight with stress and confusion. Their entire family is in an uproar. Sarah is in the bridal suite crying. Her mother looks like she wants to murder someone. You can't just drop a bomb like that and walk away. I can, I replied calmly. And I did. What did you expect me to do, Mark? Stand there and let them call me a wallet, let them reduce me to a bank account in front of my own son? No, but a clause, a morality clause in our house agreement. Mom, did you really do that? Yes, I did, I said, without a trace of apology. My lawyer, Mr. Davison, has a copy. So do I. It's standard practice for large financial gifts to protect the benefactor from fraud or undue influence. I just never thought I'd have to invoke it against my own family on your wedding day. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the distant thump of the band starting a new song. They're awful for what they said, he finally conceded, his voice softer. I can't believe they said that. But to threaten to take away our house, our future, I didn't threaten to take away your future, Mark. I clarified, my voice sharp. I threatened to stop funding the lifestyle your in-laws feel they are entitled to. The house, the trust, those were gifts. Gifts can be rescinded if the terms are not met. The primary term was respect, and it was violated in the most flagrant way possible. I took a breath. This is not about punishing you, it's about me no longer being willing to finance my own humiliation. So what happens now? He asked, his voice laced with despair. That, I said, is largely up to your wife and her family. They can apologize. A real, sincere apology. Not the "I'm sorry you were offended" nonsense that Brenda tried to pull. Or they can continue to believe they are the victims here. The choice is theirs, but my position is non-negotiable. And what about me and Sarah? This was the question that mattered, the one that made my heart ache. You and Sarah have a choice to make too. You need to decide what kind of life you want to build. One based on honesty and mutual respect, or one built on a foundation of entitlement and deception, funded by a wallet that's expected to remain silent. You need to talk to your wife, Mark. And she needs to talk to her family. I will be at my hotel. Let me know what you decide. I ended the call before he could reply, my hand trembling slightly. That was the hardest part, drawing a line in the sand that my own son was on the other side of. But it had to be done. If I backed down now, I would be confirming their definition of me. I spent the next hour in that silent library, the minutes ticking by like hours. I thought about Sarah. I genuinely liked her. She was bright and ambitious, but she was also a product of her upbringing, caught between her family's proud, corrosive narrative and the reality of their situation. Had she known about their comments? Did she share their views? The thought was a cold stone in my stomach. Finally, there was a soft knock on the library door. "Come in," I said, my voice hoarse. The door opened, and it wasn't Mark. It was Sarah. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her perfect makeup smudged. The magnificent wedding gown now seemed like a costume she couldn't wait to shed. She closed the door quietly behind her and stood there for a moment, looking small and lost in the grand room. "Mrs. Evans," she began, her voice barely a whisper. Can I talk to you?" "Of course, Sarah," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite me. "And please call me Helen." She shook her head, wringing her hands. "I don't think I have the right to call you that right now." She took a few hesitant steps forward. "I am so sorry. What my mother and my aunt said. It was unforgivable. It was disgusting. And it's not how I feel. I swear it's not." I watched her, my expression unreadable. "I want to believe you, Sarah." "It's true," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes again. "My family, they're complicated. They live in the past. They're so obsessed with the Preston name and what it used to mean that they can't stand the fact that we need help, that I need help." Her voice cracked. "They're proud, and it makes them cruel. They resent you because you have what they lost. They resent you because you didn't inherit it, you earned it. It's not an excuse. There is no excuse, but it's the truth." She finally sank into the chair, looking defeated. "When Mark told me what you said about the clause, my first reaction was panic. About the house, the money, and I'm so ashamed of that. It proved them right, in a way. It proved that the money mattered." "It does matter," I said softly. "Let's not pretend it doesn't. Money is a tool. It builds things. It provides security. It creates opportunities. There's no shame in that. The shame is in what you're willing to do for it, or what you think it entitles you to." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "I don't want to be like them, Helen. I love Mark. I chose him, not for his money, or your money. I chose him for who he is. For his kindness, his strength, the kindness and strength you taught him." She took a shaky breath. "I just went and spoke to my mother and aunt. I told them that if they don't come to you and apologize, a real apology, then I am done. I will not have that kind of poison in my life, or in my marriage." My mother, she didn't take it well. She called me an ungrateful traitor. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Maybe I am. But I'd rather be a traitor to their bitterness than be a traitor to my husband and to you." In that moment, watching this young woman essentially choose to sever ties with her family for the sake of her new one, I saw something I hadn't seen before. I saw her character. It was buried under layers of insecurity and family baggage, but it was there. It was strong. "What do you want to happen now, Sarah?" I asked, my tone gentler. "I want to earn back your respect," she said, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "Mark and I, we don't want the trust fund, the money for his business, the graduate school funding. We can't accept it, not like this. It would feel dirty. We want to make it on our own. The house, I know the deposit is paid. We would be eternally grateful if you'd let us rent it from you. We'll pay market rate. We'll sign a contract. We need to start our marriage on our own 2 feet. Not standing on your checkbook." I was stunned. This was the last thing I expected. She wasn't just trying to placate me. She was trying to fundamentally change the dynamic. She was rejecting the role of the dependent and in doing so, rejecting her family's entire worldview. She was choosing a harder path, but one that was her own. For the first time since I'd overheard that wretched conversation, the knot of anger and hurt inside me began to loosen. Maybe I hadn't ruined my son's wedding day. Maybe I hadn't ruined my son's wedding day. Maybe I had just saved his marriage before it even truly began. I looked at Sarah, truly looked at her, and saw past the weeping bride to the woman she was determined to become. Her proposal to pay rent, to refuse the trust fund, was more than a strategic retreat. It was a declaration of independence. It was a repudiation of the Preston ethos of entitlement. It was in its own way a profound apology. "All right, Sarah," I said slowly, the words feeling heavy and momentous. "If that's what you and Mark want, I will respect it. We can have Mr. Davison draw up a rental agreement for the house." A wave of relief washed over her face, so potent it was almost visible. "Thank you, Helen. Thank you." But I added, holding her gaze, "I want to be very clear. My intention was never to leave you and Mark struggling. My intention was to give you a foundation. The purpose of my wealth is to provide security and opportunity for my family. That has not changed. But the terms of engagement have. From now on, our relationship will be built on honesty and mutual respect, not on silent transactions." Just then, the library door opened again. This time it was Mark. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, his new wife and his mother sitting opposite each other, the emotional storm having clearly broken. He looked at me, his eyes asking 1,000 questions. "It's okay, Mark," Sarah said, turning in her seat. "We were just talking." He walked over and stood behind her chair, placing his hands on her shoulders. He looked at me. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have defended you immediately. I was just so shocked." "We were all shocked, Mark," I replied. "But what matters is what we do after the shock wears off." "Sarah told me what she proposed," he said, his grip on her shoulders tightening with pride. "About the house, the trust. I agree with her, 100%. We need to do this ourselves. We need to prove, to you and to ourselves, that our marriage is what matters, not the money." My heart swelled. This was my son. This was the man I had raised. He had been caught off guard, but his moral compass was true. He had chosen his partner, and together they were choosing integrity. "I'm proud of you both," I said, and my voice, to my surprise, was thick with emotion. "This is a difficult way to start a marriage, but I have a feeling it's going to make you stronger than you can possibly imagine." I stood up. "Now there is still a party going on. It's your wedding reception. I suggest you two go out there and dance. Have a piece of your cake. Create a few happy memories to balance out the drama. Your guests are waiting for you." "What about you?" Mark asked. "And what about them?" "I will handle your in-laws," I said, a grim determination in my voice. "You two go, be happy." They hesitated, then nodded. Mark leaned down and kissed Sarah, a gesture of reassurance. As they left the library, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The battle was over, and in an unexpected way, everyone had won something important. I gave them a 10-minute head start before I made my way back to the ballroom. As I entered, I saw Cynthia and Brenda standing rigidly near the entrance, their faces pale masks of fury. They were talking to a few other family members, no doubt spreading their poisoned version of events. As soon as they saw me, the conversation stopped. All eyes turned to me. I walked directly toward them, my path unwavering. The moment had come for the final act. "Cynthia, Brenda," I said, my voice low and devoid of any emotion but finality. "A moment of your time." Brenda scoffed. "I think you've said quite enough for one day." "Not quite," I replied. "Your daughter and my son have just made a decision. They have refused my financial gifts. They will be renting their home from me, and they will build their life on their own terms. Your behavior today has cost your daughter the secure start I intended for her." Cynthia's eyes widened in genuine shock. This was a consequence she hadn't foreseen. She had likely assumed I would eventually relent for Mark's sake. She what? You heard me. The trust is dissolved. The funding for her education is withdrawn. All of it. They want to prove they are not like you. And I have to say, I admire them for it immensely. I let that sink in, watching the dawning horror on their faces as they realized the material cost of their arrogance. You wanted me to fade into the background. Congratulations, you've succeeded. My finances will no longer be a part of your daughter's life. Now you have two choices, I continued, my voice like ice. Choice one, you walk over to my son and your daughter right now. You give them a sincere, heartfelt apology for ruining this day for them. You don't have to apologize to me. I don't want to hear it. My opinion of you is set in stone, but you will apologize to your child. Choice 2. You leave, right now. You walk out of this reception, and you do not speak to Sarah or Mark again until they decide they are ready to speak to you. They stared at me, aghast. They were being given an ultimatum, and they had no leverage. They looked around, seeking support, but found only the curious or disapproving eyes of their own relatives who had now heard the story from both sides. This is blackmail, Brenda hissed. No, I corrected her. This is consequences. You whispered in the shadows. I am simply turning on the lights. What you do now, in the light, is up to you. But know this, if you choose to leave, I will make sure Mark and Sarah have all the support, emotional not financial, they will ever need. You will have made yourselves irrelevant. Cynthia looked across the room at Sarah, who was now on the dance floor with Mark. For the first time, she wasn't looking at Sarah as a pawn or an extension of the Preston legacy. She was just looking at her daughter, who was trying to salvage a smile on her wedding day. A flicker of something, maternal instinct perhaps, or just profound regret, crossed her face. Without another word, she turned and began walking toward the dance floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Brenda glared at me one last time, her eyes full of hatred, before turning and marching stiffly out of the ballroom and toward the exit. She had made her choice. I watched as Cynthia approached the newlyweds. I couldn't hear her words, but I saw her touch Sarah's arm. I saw Sarah's tense posture. I saw Mark step protectively closer to his wife. I saw Cynthia speak for a long time, her head bowed, and then I saw Sarah give a slow, hesitant nod. It was not forgiveness. It was not a happy ending. It was a beginning. A painful, messy but honest beginning. A painful, messy but honest beginning. I didn't need to be there for the rest. My part was done. I had redrawn the map of our family. I had built new fences, good fences, just as Tom had advised. Quietly, I slipped out of the ballroom and onto the terrace. The sun had set, and a blanket of stars was emerging in the deep indigo sky. The air was cool and clean. I was no longer just the wallet. I was Helen Evans, a mother, a businesswoman, a widow, a fighter, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely wholly myself. The price of this day had been high, but the cost of my silence would have been infinitely higher. I had bought something far more valuable than a wedding. I had bought respect,